We acknowledge and respect the first humans of the unceded land we call San Francisco, the Ramaytush Ohlone. We condemn the genocide of these and other tribes across the Western Hemisphere. We honor their legacy and history, and we support rematriation and sovereignty efforts. Hello and welcome to Storied San Francisco, a podcast all about the people and places that make this city unique. I'm Jeff Hunt, and I'll be your host. We're really excited about this one. I lived on 20th Street in the Mission for 14 years, up until 2017. One of my favorite things about that part of the hood was the Pirate Supply Store at 826 Valencia. Because of its storefront location, I was unaware of the workshops and classrooms situated behind the store, and that 826 was actually a nonprofit. In this episode, we meet 826 Valencia Director of Volunteer Engagement, Kavitha Lotun, and Pirate Supply Store Manager, Byron Weiss. In part 1, Kavitha and Byron will tell their respective stories of growing up, moving to San Francisco, and finding 826 Valencia. We'll talk about the gentrification specific to the mission the last 15 years or so. And we'll end this episode with some background on what 826 Valencia is all about. Here's my chat with Kavitha and Byron.
I'm trying to decide if I start now and move backwards or start from the beginning. But I'll go back to pre-San Francisco. I was born in England but raised mostly in Canada, and became a school teacher. I graduated with a Bachelor of Education, living in Vancouver, BC.
Oh,
and yes,
I've never been.
A beautiful place.
Oh, it's top of my list.
And it's a different education system than the one we have here in the United States, and particularly in SF. So in Vancouver, it was hard to get jobs after getting that degree. You had to really work your way as being a substitute first, and then I really, really wanted my own classroom. But being British, having been born there, I was able to easily move to London and start working in my own classroom.
Okay.
So I was
what level of
kindergarten
children?
teacher.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, I was just reflecting on that because it was about 11 years ago where I taught my last class and officially was like Miss Premaraja when I was, before I was married. That was my name. And my husband, then we did get married and we were ready to relocate for his role working in tech. So the classic moved to San Francisco, immigrated here. Both of us being Canadian, it was a whole new journey to move to America.
Did you visit San Francisco first?
Great question. I had been as a child. We had done like a road trip coming down to do Disneyland as a kid from Vancouver.
Right.
We did do a pre-visit, knowing this was probably the move. About 6 months prior, we just came and checked it out, and he was already working at Twitter, actually, at the time. So. And
this was roughly 12-ish years ago?
2012, yeah.
2012, okay.
2011 we decided, 2012 we moved. So got to the U.S. I actually wasn't allowed to work yet, didn't have a work visa. Was really wanting to understand the school system here. And I had already heard it's a challenging place.
Specifically San Francisco, or just broadly the United States? Broadly
United States was all I knew.
Two things. Two
very huge things, and they operate in such strange ways. In every city and every state can do something different. So with SF, I think I understood that there was even more complications around like applying to go to school. It wasn't as easy as going to your neighborhood school.
Right.
But anyways, we weren't even parents yet at this point. Right. I wanted to learn about what the classrooms are like and what are teachers up against, because I was hearing that it's a challenge to keep teachers in the district. So in the meantime, I'm just enjoying my free time, not working, getting a tour of the mission from my friend Lowell. Shout out to Lowell.
Thanks, Lowell. You lived in the mission, or?
Lowell did.
Okay.
And so he was giving me a little walking tour of his city. He'd lived here several years prior to us moving here, but he's also Canadian. And he was just pointed at this pirate store and said they do stuff with kids in there. That's all I got. Are you sure
this wasn't me? That sounds like my level of knowledge.
A pirate store. So I immediately went home and researched it on Google and thought, wow, a writing program. Like that's something that I struggled with as a teacher, to really focus on writing, especially with kindergartners, especially when they're only 4 years old in England and they're like asked to start reading and writing by...
Isn't that like learning to write the alphabet?
They wanted them writing sentences at the end of... Yeah, that's a school system that's like very rigorous and and monitored a lot differently than the SF school system is.
Okay.
So I started volunteering, and so 2012 I became an 826 Valencia volunteer. I came every week. I volunteered in a program called Storytelling and Bookmaking, and I'm sure later we'll talk more about that. There's more to that journey now in the last 10 years, but it feels special that 10 years has gone by.
So it was 10 years ago that you did this, that you started this
volunteering.
Okay. Excellent.
Yeah.
What happened to your accent? Or did you ever have one?
I had a wee English accent.
Like a Queen's English kind of accent?
Yeah, it comes and goes only if I'm in England. But no, I really mostly have a Canadian accent.
Is the Vancouver, is that the Aboot? No, it's more the Eastern that's like Aboot.
Well,
no?
We have different, the A comes out. Do you notice anything, Byron?
I don't ever notice.
Do you notice my
I forget.
I say washroom sometimes and people
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
I think I acclimatized pretty quickly. 10 years in the Bay.
That'll do it. Yeah.
I've blended in.
Yeah. And last question, specifically about Canada. Are we wrong to romanticize Canada here in these, especially in like the Bay Area? I feel like there's a lot of us who are like...
No, I don't think you're wrong to romanticize it. I think I haven't lived there in the last 17 years to know some of the challenges folks are going through, maybe like economically and politically. I think there can be this sway towards some of the challenges we see in the U.S. However, overall, access to healthcare, access to education, just a general understanding of like people first, I feel is more prominent there by government, how the government works. But no, it's not perfect. You will have things to deal with if you were to move there. So
Right. No, and I mean, this sounds cynical, but I mean it kind of half seriously that, like I said, I've never been to Vancouver, but I always think about things like climate change, and I'm like, well, Vancouver could be tropical, and that sounds kind of cool to me.
It is like a rainforest.
Yes, I could be like guacamole and a pina colada in... No, I'm kidding. But I had to ask an actual Canadian that question. It's been on my mind for a while.
Yeah.
Things like the truck on Envoy. I'm like, oh, they have that too. And then it's... am I wrong that it's larger than the United States? It's a very big
Yeah, geographically,
place.
I think we're the second biggest. There's Russia and then us.
Yeah. And then also, like, still kind of part of the Commonwealth. So, like, there's all the baggage that comes along with that and the First Nations. And, So, anyway, well, you take the good with the bad.
Yeah, we should do a whole separate podcast on
about Canada.
All about Canada.
Yeah, that's exactly what it should be called. All right. Okay, so we've arrived, in your story, we've arrived at 826. So I think let's throw it to you, Byron.
Okay. I'm a California kid. I was born in the LA area. I spent about half of it, a majority of it, in the Burbank, which is in the Valley, technically. People from LA would be mad if I said I'm from LA.
And where a lot of game shows are filmed.
It's the media center of the world. My friends will cringe if they ever listen to this podcast, because I say that all the time. I live down the street from Jay Leno's garage manager.
Okay.
If you live in Burbank, you see Jay Leno.
And Jay Leno and his garage is really...
He has a bunch of cars. He
integral to his whole being.
It's a whole thing. Anyway, when I was applying for colleges, most of my choices were East Coast, but I chose SF State as a backup, and I came up here with a couple friends. It was one of my first trips, just like me and some friends, no parents.
Road trip?
We took a plane up here.
Okay.
And I just fell in love with the city, honestly. I couldn't get enough of it. And it wasn't even like, we stayed out by with that like dog statue by the zoo, Outer Sunset, way Outer Sunset.
Oh yeah, Doggy Diner.
Some motel out there. Like, it wasn't like we were doing SF like in the coolest way. But I just like, I don't know, I couldn't escape it.
Actually, Doggy Diner
I think you were.
That's cred. Doggy Diner heads. Yeah.
And I think like I mean, it's funny because I complain about the Muni all the time now, but like, just like public transit wasn't a thing I had experienced in LA. And just like the vibe, I just like people were friendly and like out in the street, which is also not true in LA as much. Like, or at least when I was growing up there.
Yeah. I can speak from experience of 2 weeks ago. It's still the case.
Yeah.
Like people are out because the weather's always fucking awesome.
But it's not like...
But it's car culture.
Yeah. Car culture for real. And I've always been pretty anti-car culture.
And when was that initial visit, that first visit?
2007, I guess. 2006, because I moved up here in 2007. So the end of that story is that I loved SF, and I was like, in SF, I studied creative writing. SF State has a good creative writing program.
Yeah. It's a great school, too.
Yeah, it's a great school. I had a really good time there. So yeah, I moved up here to go to there, and that's I've been here ever since. So that was 15 years ago or something. I can't do math.
That's okay.
Aforementioned writing degree. So I moved up here. I just never really left. I loved living here. I really liked my school. I'm very fortunate to have like a really close, tight-knit group of like a dozen or so friends that all haven't left. So we're all still here and like got a really big community, got a lot of roots here. And specifically have been in and out of the Mission my whole time. I'm a young person. I did the whole like, you got to stay in this place with 5 people, and then like I lived like in a makeshift closet for a while. Shared it actually.
Like spend a significant part of your life on Craigslist.
Yes, a good amount
for varying reasons, like
apartment hunting, free furniture, all that kind of stuff. Misconnections is a great read on
150,000%.
Yeah.
I used to joke like. If you spend enough time now anywhere, because everywhere has Craigslist, but like in a place like San Francisco, you start off and then you slowly like spend less and less time if things
go well.
Sure. I didn't want to judge it, but like, you just find yourself on Craigslist less and less and less. Anyway, I'll still take Craigslist over next. True. I'll take it over next door any day.
I'll take Craigslist over a lot of things.
Yeah.
I appreciate they're not trying to hide anything. It's just, it feels like I know what I'm getting.
It still looks like I moved here in 2000. Yeah. I think it started, several years before that. Yeah. Still looks exactly the same.
Yeah, definitely. I love that too. So what did I...
So you bounced around. Roommate situation.
But always stayed kind of near the Mission. And then how I got here specifically, it was about 10 years ago as well. I've been on staff for 10 years. I officially, as of January 2023.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
awesome.
It's really insane. And all of that has been in the stores too, which is also kind of unique. But I was working at the Gap to pay rent.
Which one?
The one downtown that's not there anymore.
Oh, yeah.
The flagship.
The house on the turnaround.
Yeah, it was huge. I worked in kids, baby, and maternity, and I did so many things there. I did visuals, I did backstory. I don't know, it's too much stuff. And I kind of hated it. I'm very not a corporate kind of guy. But I learned a lot about retail, and then my friend was interning here, and for programs, he was tutoring or whatever, and he was like, hey, they're hiring for the Pirates store, and at this point I hadn't heard anything about it, so I was like, I'll go check it out, and I put in my resume, and I just met the manager, Olivia, at the time.
Oh yeah.
I was just a really good fit. I had the writing interest. I'm really good with kids. I love working with kids, and I had the retail experience, which is something that is hard to find for this kind of this industry, I think.
Niche.
Yes. So I fenced competitively growing up. So I had the swashbuckler, I had the beard. It just it was a really good fit. Everything kind of fit.
Might be the first. Is it Fencer,
a foilist
on the podcast.
Oh, there you go. I could
200
do a whole,
plus episodes.
I could do a whole episode on fencing too if you want. But yeah, so that's what I just found my home here. Really.
So you came in as a full-time employee.
Part-time employee.
Or part-time.
I was part-time in the store.
Okay, whereas you came in volunteer.
I would say most people, up until recently, probably, most people came through volunteering, I would say. I'm a pretty rare case in that I came not from volunteering and also through the store, which is, not how most people find us, I guess.
Because you found out through an intern, so that's, kind of the way.
Yeah.
But it is literally how the public comes in.
Yes. That is what I tell my team. That's my team's job. You nailed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
awesome.
I really. Yeah, and I've been here ever since.
10 years.
And now I live down the street in the Mission.
Yeah.
Oh, lucky dog.
Yeah, I had a pandemic come up. I don't know, like the prices went down a little bit.
About these.
My wife and I, we just like jumped on it and
nice.
Found a 2-bedroom. I never thought I'd rent a 2-bedroom on my own.
Well, I was gonna say, having been here, and again, this is something that's probably not unique to San Francisco, but I feel like maybe was more pronounced here, and especially in this neighborhood, that like when you arrived in San Francisco, shortly after that is when a pretty major transformation happened.
Yeah.
And it happened hardcore in this neighborhood. So
Yes.
you've seen
I felt it.
And felt it. Yeah.
I've been around long enough to remember Valencia Street with 2 lanes and a bus running down it. I was vegan back then, and my friend and I would come in
26.
Yeah, and we'd come in. Yeah, 26. Yeah, and we'd come in and we'd go to Herbivore, which was down the street.
This predates my time.
It's a long time ago, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was here for like I feel like the start of a big boon. I've talked to people too who said like actually that's like the second wave. It's happened multiple times. I don't know.
Right.
But for me,
I don't think anyone
can
keep track of
different.
how many.
A
It's
lot
just
of it.
like how many have you experienced or witnessed or
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's how I found my place in the city and my place here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know exactly which one of you or both of you to throw this question to, but let's pretend for a second like listeners have no freaking clue what 826 Valencia even is. And the pirate supply store, excuse me, can be part of that, but like origins and things like that. So
yeah,
I'll just throw that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, coming in directly to start volunteering was all around the youth. So I had stuck to their mission of supporting under-resourced youth with writing and writing skills and gaining confidence in their skills as writers, and working directly with youth both at our centers and in school. So that drew me to why I wanted to become a volunteer.
Okay.
Then I had to learn from the community, why is there a pirate store? And back then it was a little sort of like everyone had their own version of the story, which was really fun to hear.
Doesn't that make it lore?
Yeah,
it's total lore. I think now
I love that. Yeah, it should be.
So, I mean, Byron might have to correct me because I just heard like our founders, Dave Eggers and Nineveh Caligari, who knew they wanted to found a nonprofit to support writing. Like that was clear. Nineveh worked in education, knew that teachers were really not given enough resources to really push writing forward because already there's so many other critical things to be covering in the classroom, especially creative writing. There's no time for it. I totally resonated with that as a teacher who was like, you have to teach all your kids phonics, but they're not going to get time to just like write their own story or create their own magical adventure. So I had heard that they had a space here already to do some sort of publishing.
McSweeney's.
Okay.
Dave's publishing company, McSweeney's, which they're still across the street. And they get their mail. If you hear this, McSweeney's, please get your mail to your address.
Public service announcement. Story in San Francisco.
So yeah, 2002, McSweeney's is chugging along in here, and Dave and Nineveh are like, we have this community of like writers and folks that have some time they could give to these communities of students that live right here in the Mission. But they have to be zoned for retail if you wanted to start a nonprofit or anything in this space had to have a retail element. That's the way it's zoned.
Right.
So I'll pass it to Byron for.
Yeah, I mean that's the bare bones. It's zoned for retail. So what I've heard is Dave was like, oh, it's kind of wooden in here. Like no one's selling to pirates. I guess we will. I think like. If you ask Dave on a different day, he'll probably give you a different answer every day. But that's kind of the gist. Is it was like something funny and that would get your kind of like brain moving in creative ways.
Creative.
Yeah, and then
totally.
When I talk to my team about it and we talk about how to engage it, it's like it's kind of like an onion, right? Like you like come in, a good onion, I guess, like a cool, sweet tasting onion or something. Like you come in and it's like, wow, this really weird store. Like why is this here? And then you're like. You kind of like peel back like, oh, there's like a writing program in the back. Oh, it's like a free for everyone who comes. Oh, they publish the students' work in these books. Like, so it's just you find out more as you stay in longer. And by the time I feel like people are volunteers like Kavitha was, they're like like the pirate store is kind of like almost in the back of their brain because all the other stuff is so much more magical, honestly. As much as I dedicate my life to the pirate store, and my team does, like magic is what the students are doing and what the tutors are doing with the students.
Fair enough.
And the students get to come in through this portal that's completely different from being in a school building or in their home. There's always something different to look at. But you walk through the pirate store and you enter your own special writing lab, and I think that became a second home for me. I was here in the city with an awesome group of friends who also had moved to SF to work in tech, but I felt very disconnected from that world and wasn't finding anyone else that connected with me as an educator or someone who supported nonprofit work. But that's where this community became like a magnet for me.
Your people.
So that's why I'm still here. I mean, it's been interesting trajectory given that I then couldn't work. I didn't have a work visa, so volunteering was the only option. Then I had my first child, so I was able to spend precious time at home with him, but I still started coming back to 826 and tutoring once he was kind of old enough to hang with a babysitter for a few hours. That was a constant for me, becoming a mother and like keeping that pulse on what are students in SF doing.
Right.
And so in that time I got to volunteer as a parent and then started learning more about the school district. Now I have a child, I'm like, I have to understand this more and more.
Right.
But yeah, that constant of being connected to a community outside of that tech bubble was really important. And then I started tutoring students who talked, because you all were just discussing the gentrification of Mission and Valencia Street. And I guess I moved here in that wave for sure.
Correct. It was already well underway.
Yes. I didn't see the before as much as what you described.
Yeah. I think one benchmark is like you were talking about Valencia being 2 lanes, the widening of the sidewalks, which in every other like aspect of my life, I'm like, yes, that's amazing. It's going to be something happened with that and getting rid of the bus. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah, I had no idea actually until you mentioned that.
A lot of stuff. No bike lane back then either.
Correct.
So trying to balance like being a gentrifier myself, like we moved here being part of that huge wave and trying to understand what actual San Franciscans, families that are living here, being challenged by all this, how they were feeling. It would just naturally come up as a topic to write about. So our students would write about gentrification pretty often.
Amazing.
And that's what I love about the volunteer role is like you're breaking down these barriers that just happen to exist in the way we move about society here in SF, because that bubble that I'm in and most of my husband's colleagues are in, it's like you move from your work to your home to where you're going out for dinner, and you're not like really meeting people in between. You're just meeting the folks that are like-minded and from similar backgrounds.
It's like a moving bubble.
Yes.
Right, it moves
via Uber. Like it's just
right.
It still is a challenge for me, but it's been so great to have like public school community now. So fast forward to now, parent of 2 kids in public school, and that's where my passion is for why we do this work at 826, because we're supporting all these families and all these kids with getting their voices out into the world and publishing them.
Amazing.
They talk all about San Francisco and can't wait for you to hear some of their podcasts too.
Yeah, that'll happen. Stay tuned. No, and if I may editorialize, yes to everything you're saying, but you specifically found a way to get back. Found a way to engage in a positive way. And I feel like that's all anyone would ask. Right? Yeah. Change is inevitable. I don't know if gentrification is inevitable. I won't say that. But like, change is inevitable.
Yes.
And especially a town like this, people are always going to, like, no matter what the economy is, it's just fucking beautiful and amazing in so many ways. So people will always be coming here.
Yeah.
It's what you do with it. And I feel like you did something super awesome.
Oh, thank you.
So.
Well, and I think, like you said, like, clean sidewalks, walking space, bike lanes aren't
trees
are things that we as humans, I think most of us want around. It's like, but who gets to stay and benefit from that? And I do feel like that's why I stay at 826. I think we've grown a lot. We have 2 new centers since both of us started, and like we do a lot of work, and we've really like we still are very creative, but we're very like academic focused too now compared to when I started. But we still like through and through have always really centered students of color, students of lower income backgrounds, like and really it's like we're never even talking about paying like any programs being paid for. Everything we do is free for anyone who can access it. And all of our outreach for students is those populations I mentioned. So like and they're here, like in working in the store, I get questions from time to time from people being like, oh, but like, they're not even here to serve anymore. Like gentrification got them all out. I was like, no, they're still here. Just they're not given a lot of opportunity to speak up. So that's I think.
Yeah, people don't open their eyes to what's right next door and who lives next door. And I think we give that opportunity. So fast forward to now, in between having my kids, I part-time did get hired to work teaching some of the workshops as a programs coordinator, the storytelling bookmaking workshop. That was super fun. And then after my second child was born, I was ready for full-time work again, and we had expanded like 2 centers. We need the volunteers to give individualized support to students, to build those connections, have those conversations, and get them really thinking about something they're going to put into writing and get published. So I became the intern manager actually first, but that led to now being the volunteer engagement team lead and director. And I get to just support all the adults in understanding how to be awesome tutors. And really that's just being a connector, being someone that encourages the student you're with. They don't have to be prolific writers. I think that's a misconception people have.
I was going to ask, do they need to be educators or creators? Like, what do you look for in a volunteer?
Not at all.
Just interest?
Time and care for your community. And then, being able to have a conversation with a young person and get them going with their ideas and help them with the process. And then our staff, 826 staff, are phenomenal. They're the ones who are doing the whole lesson plan, guiding all the volunteers and the students together collectively through a project. To get that outcome of, yes, you will be published this year. Like, which piece are you going to choose to put in the publication?
Amazing.
Our pedagogy, our like a lot of our philosophy is really around just getting like as close to one-to-one support as we can. Like relationship building is what I think we find the most success. Like when the student trusts that tutor, wants to work with that tutor, it doesn't matter what they're working on. Like we also have after school homework help, so like, and all of us staff, or most of us are writers, so like we definitely need math people for that, for example. So if you like math and you want to volunteer, but I think mostly it's just like, do you enjoy being with kids, and like, can you donate a couple hours a week?
Like, do you believe in this work?
Yeah. That's really all you need. It sounds hokey maybe, or cringy, but it's true. I think it's like there's not really any requirements.
I don't think
beyond
so.
that.
I mean, I think people don't realize that there's a bigger aspect to the community they're in, and that's where like you just see people like open their eyes wider to, we're not just in this place in the mission. All these students are going to schools across the city. They're living in different places. They've come from different backgrounds. Some are multi-generational San Francisco born and raised families, and many are new immigrants that had to come more recently, or their parents immigrated. But there's just so many ice-breaking moments that people have together, and I think it's a unique space to be able to do that and build relationships.
Before I forget, one other thing I'm going to touch on, there's that trope about San Francisco that, what is it, like there's more dogs than there are children here. And while that might be technically true, I don't really care, but like that sort of forgets the kids who are here.
Yes.
And absolutely. I think y'all are a great example of like, and then there's the other, perhaps correct, conception that our public schools are not very good.
Yeah, they're not like
they're not
funded. I would say
they're not funded. They're not prioritized. And then if this is where I don't understand how to vote here in the U.S. because
or San Francisco,
because the props aren't something we did in Canada. You're not voting on what the politician you voted for has to make those decisions. So you really think hard about the platform of that person and of that party. But here, there's a lot more given to the individual people of the city to decide. and you have to study for it.
Right.
Which is not an accessible form for a lot of folks who are just learning English or are convinced, by hearsay. But anyways, that aside, the fact that we fund schools that way blows my mind, because it's just like an allocation in the other countries I lived in.
Yeah.
And here it's like, are we going to get the money or not?
Yeah.
So public schools aren't given a fair shot. Teachers aren't paid enough. 100%. They are good schools. I think that's the part that is a misconception that people have.
It's more than just LOL, y'all.
Yeah.
Yes. The system that parents are asked to, apply for, and then suddenly there's this segregation that happens in who thinks what's a good school versus not a good school. They just look at scores that don't really tell the whole story. So we know that at 826 because we're in there working with these brilliant teachers.
Right.
And who are short-staffed. We don't have enough substitutes in the district right now. Right. Things like that make it a harder day and a harder job to do. And then, yes, sadly, it's hard to live in the city on a teacher salary. So do we have enough teachers staying and growing? That's another challenge.
And the pandemic's only made it worse. I think we have hired 3 or 4 people in the last couple of years that came from teaching, and just it just got too difficult. Not enough support, not enough funding, like Kavitha's saying. So but they need the help. A lot of what we do is just bringing bodies to teachers. That's like a big help that we bring, aside from all the beautiful writing that the students do. It's like just getting people to be with the kids is really important.
That was Kavitha, Lotun, and Byron Weiss from 826 Valencia. Check back next week for part 2 with Kavitha and Byron. That episode drops next Tuesday. Music for Storied San Francisco was produced, performed, and curated by Otis McDonald. Michelle Kilfeather does original photography for us. Aaron Lim of Bitch Talk Podcast is our contributing producer. And the show is produced and hosted by me, Jeff Hunt. Now in our 5th season, we have more than 200 episodes available on our website, storiedsf.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're able to, please rate and review the show. And drop us a line at storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Stay strong, weird, and healthy. And we'll see you next time on Storied San Francisco.
This podcast is a proud member of the BFF.FM podcast network. Learn more at podcast.bff.fm.
BFF.FM, best frequencies forever.